All right, so the dust is settled, and Penn State took multiple losses on the recruiting trail, and most of them came at the hands of Notre Dame.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting, or lack thereof, maybe I should say. And thank you, as always, for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and wrestling. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. In this show, we are going to talk about the recruiting gut punch. Now that the dust has settled, 4 priority prospects. Penn State misses out on arguably the top 5 remaining, 4 of the top 5 remaining prospects that were on their big board. Joey O'Brien, Khary Adams, Grayson McKeogh, Luke Wafle. 3 of them go to Notre Dame. So it's not only losing the prospects, it's who you're losing them to. We're just going to talk about generally, what does this mean for Penn State? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Let's start with the what. So what happened? Well, Penn State did miss those 4 priority prospects, all 4 of them, Luke Wafle going to USC, but the other 3, Joey O'Brien, Khary Adams, Grayson McHugh, all going to Notre Dame. And I think because it happened in a week's time, less than that, just over a few days, back to back to back to back like that, and Penn State really nowhere to be found in the home stretch of these recruitments from what we've gathered here, is that there was, okay, maybe there was a little bit of a late push for Luke Wafle, but it seemed like with the intel, everything was lining up for Joey O'Brien to commit to Notre Dame, for Khary Adams to do the same. Grayson McHugh led it off, offensive tackle. So that's what hurts, is that it's not only losing your top priority prospects, but you didn't lose them to SEC teams. You lost them to Notre Dame, who just beat you in the college football semifinals by 3 points. But still, it seems like there is some serious momentum from that victory by the Fighting Irish. I think right now, Notre Dame certainly has that kind of momentum, that they are the bigger brand. Marcus Freeman, right now, prospects are looking at him better than James Franklin. That can change. That can definitely change. But we're seeing right now in these head-to-head recruiting battles, they're not really going back and forth. This is very much one-sided here, and it's in your backyard. It's in your backyard in the state of Pennsylvania. If these were regional recruits, okay, Khary Adams is certainly that from the state of Maryland, but Joey O'Brien, top prospect, one of them. You know, I'm very partial to Kevin Brown. I think Kevin Brown's going to be a 5-star when all is said and done with these 2026 recruiting rankings. But depending on who you ask, could easily be Joey O'Brien, because I think of the versatility. Kevin Brown, certainly sky is the limit with his potential. But to explain this, Joey O'Brien as a pending 5-star safety, he already is, according to 24/7, but not quite a consensus, but could be at the end of the day. Somebody that could have played free safety, wide receiver. That's how Penn State was recruiting him. Notre Dame's recruiting him as a cornerback, from what we've been told from Brian Smith, the recruiting expert here at Locked On. And then Khary Adams as well. These are headline caliber prospects. High-end 4-stars, potential 5-star prospects that would have really helped Penn State, obviously. And you lose them to Notre Dame. Grayson McHugh as well. Offensive line is certainly not finished. Secondary is definitely loaded up. And I want to go back to that. I can't help but shake the feeling. I talk about how actions speak louder than words. Most people say that, and it's true. Penn State has 6 defensive back commitments in this class of 2026. Do they have reason to believe that Khary Adams, Joey O'Brien, we're not going to end up in Happy Valley for quite some time. I want to give credit where credit's due, because Joey O'Brien Penn State may have never been the leader in that recruitment at any point in time. The insiders at Notre Dame's section of On Three's Notre Dame website, they said they had Joey O'Brien projected to the Fighting Irish for almost a year. And that Penn State, the two-way athlete, be a wide receiver, be a safety for us, was a last-ditch attempt to try to get him away from Notre Dame. And it didn't work. Khary Adams, though, that one I'm a little more surprised at, but I think that the secondary coach for Notre Dame, Mike Mickens, really just won that recruiting battle. We're also going to talk about NIL here, so that's a part of this show too. But Notre Dame did win these battles, I think, fair and square. I don't think Penn State was never in a position to land Joey O'Brien, that they were in the leader of this recruitment. Khary Adams, I could say differently. I know that his family really liked Penn State and what the program had to offer. Adams certainly liked Penn State, but Notre Dame won in the end in that recruiting battle. And then Grayson McKeogh. It's not entirely it's all NIL related. That's not the case here. NIL is going to play a factor one way or another, so we'll talk about that a little more with Luke Wafle in the upcoming segment. But to focus on losing to Notre Dame, being swept by Notre Dame, from what I heard, there were comparable NIL offers for Grayson McKeogh at Penn State, between Penn State and Notre Dame. And McHugh chose Notre Dame. Penn State losing multiple top prospects in the state of Pennsylvania. This isn't the first time that it's happened before. Penn State does a really good job in the state of Pennsylvania. Go figure, right? But that's the whole idea, is it's dominate the state. You have to dominate the state. And I think Penn State does a good job of it. But right now, this is certainly a gut punch for two top 5 Pennsylvania prospects. One who could potentially be a potential 5-star at the end of the day. Joey O'Brien, I got to argue, might have been able to play. He might have played right away for Penn State going into next season. You lose Zach Wheatley if he was going to play free safety. In theory, if he enrolls early, probably could have been on the 2-deep depth chart going into next season. That's the kind of caliber that a player that Penn State is losing. Khary Adams certainly would have played earlier or right away just because he's so talented. Brian came on the show, Brian Smith, and talked about how he liked Khary Adams better. That's a toss-up for me between what Joey O'Brien can do and what Khary Adams could do. But those were guys that, if they enrolled early, could have played right away in Penn State's defense, just with how good they are at football. Grayson McKeogh, I think, would have taken some time as an offensive tackle. You just need more time to develop typically than you do at defensive back, right? But these are all massive losses into one school. Now, it's not that Penn State can't recover, because we're going to talk about that. How can they recover? What do they need to do? How did NIL factor in? We also got to talk about Luke Wafle, because you want to talk about NIL directly. Does Penn State have an NIL problem? Well, it can seem like that with how USC and Ohio State approached that recruitment, but we're going to talk about it more coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. How about $150 in bonus bets to wager on all of these exciting sports? Well, if you are new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So anything, baseball, golf, soccer, WNBA, you name it. FanDuel allows you to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast for payouts, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. And you can even bet on Penn State football in the offseason. Win totals are posted for college football teams. Do you think Penn State's going to have more than 10.5 wins, or they're going to go under 10.5 wins? You can make those wagers. And if you are new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That's the FanDuel app or FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now let's pivot to Luke Wafle, because this is the recruitment that seemed like everything was going to go Penn State's way. You know, Khary Adams, Joey O'Brien, you didn't know. I thought that was a fairly, even though, hey, you have confidence in Penn State, for whatever reason, Luke Wafle, I had a pretty strong amount of confidence that they were going to land him. And they didn't. He's currently committed to USC. So let's break this all down here. This turned into, and I quote, a bidding war between USC and Ohio State. This was reported by On3, and the offer that was settled on is over $1 million per year. It's a multi-year deal, over $1 million per year. USC got one of the best defensive ends, edge defenders in the entire country. So there's a reason that this spiraled the way that it did, is because Luke Wafle is that kind of caliber prospect. USC is in the Big Ten, so it's not ideal to see him, stay within the conference. Again, Penn State isn't losing to an SEC team here. It is USC all the way on the other side of the country, but now that they're in the Big Ten, there's still that direct impact. The same thing losing to Oregon in certain recruiting battles too. I would say that it is better that he didn't go to Ohio State, because USC still is all the way on the other side of the country. That's it. Losing to Ohio State and Notre Dame, I still won't put that in the same category. I still won't put losing a recruiting battle to Oregon and USC in the same category as losing to the likes of Ohio State and Notre Dame, whether it is geographical proximity, more so about the rivalries. Again, I know Penn State's unrivaled, but I'm talking about the teams that have just gone back and forth with Penn State historically for a very long time, or have been in the thorn in the side of Penn State for a very long time. That's certainly Ohio State. But Wafle going to USC, despite Penn State having a strong relationship with the Wafle family. Owen Wafle, his older brother, is currently on the team. Defensive tackle, probably going to see some playing time. It would not shock me if Owen Wafle ended up being that fourth defensive tackle. So you have Zane Durant, you have Alonzo Ford, you have Xavier Gilliam, who seems like he's poised for a breakout season as that third defensive tackle that James Franklin identified. 4, 5, and 6, the three deep depth chart for Penn State has still yet to be decided. Owen Wafle could easily be that fourth defensive tackle and be a part of that 2 deep rotation behind those 3 that I named, Durant, Ford, and Gilliam. Luke Wafle, his brother, is not joining the team. Like I said, that was Penn State's recruiting battle to lose for the sake of, he's from the state of New Jersey. Penn State's been recruiting Owen Wafle, Luke, for a long time. There's just that strong relationship with the Wafle family. So you have location. You have a long-standing relationship. You have the fact that I am truly surprised that more defensive line prospects aren't lining up to commit to Penn State. You take what Deion Barnes has done in such a short time, who hasn't been, he's going into year 3 as the full-time defensive line coach. And he continues to help produce multiple NFL prospects, high-end multiple NFL draft prospects. Adisa Isaac going in the first 3 rounds. Chop Robinson going round number 1. After transferring in from Maryland, there was that developmental aspect. And Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter was a linebacker, and I'm not saying he wasn't going to be a first-round pick without Deion Barnes. But Carter, who was a former linebacker, Barnes has 6 months of training with him, specifically at this position. Abdul Carter wasn't going back and forth between linebacker and defensive end throughout his football career. No, he goes from playing linebacker his entire time to defensive end and becomes the best defensive end in college football for that one season with 6 months of training, with 6 months of influence, direct influence from Deion Barnes, and then becomes a top 3 NFL draft pick. This is where we are in college football. That part of the program, of the development, has lost some of its appeal. Some of it. Because we are seeing a trend here that prospects aren't considering the whole development, college football career. I don't blame Luke Wafle for capitalizing on what he's done to secure an NIL deal. And that's what we're going to wrap up in a moment with Penn State's NIL. Is this where it has to go? That Penn State has to be just as competitive in the NIL space to win football games, or else they won't, or they won't be as competitive. So we'll address that at the end. I do not blame Luke Wafle for taking a reported NIL deal of $1 million plus per season, whether that's at USC or Florida or anywhere else. USC really wanted this football player, and they were aggressive. So that's the back and forth of it. Does Penn State need to match that in this modern age of college football, or do they still need to do it the holistic way, if you will? But that was a rough stretch for Penn State football and recruiting here. Joey O'Brien, Khary Adams, Grayson McKeogh, Luke Wafle, top defensive end target in Wafle, top athlete, safety target, top cornerback target between Joey O'Brien and Khary Adams. One of the top tackle targets. I can't say that Grayson McHugh was mostly their number one offensive tackle target. I would say that's Emmanuel Iheanacho objectively. In terms of realistically, though, it's hard to say that Iheanacho is going to go to Penn State because Oregon's right there, LSU is right there. And if we're talking about how Penn State struggles with NIL, and I don't know that Iheanacho's as realistic a prospect as Grayson McHugh is. And again, from what I heard, NIL offers were comparable between Notre Dame and Penn State, specifically for McHugh. I can't speak to O'Brien and Adams, but I can speak directly from what I've been told about McHugh. That was rough. That was rough. So now it begs the question, is Penn State even going to be able to compete in recruiting the way that they need to against the elites, against the blue bloods, and try to be a tier 1 team in college football? So let's address the NIL aspect of it. I don't think Penn State has a problem long term, and I'll explain why coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Penn State's NIL, is it good? Is it bad? Where does it stand? Because it certainly did not help them here down the stretch in the class of 2026. I just hope this is all worth it, because Penn State's NIL is better. It is good. There's no reason that Penn State can't be a top 10 school in NIL. I hate this is what college football has become, is which schools have the most money to spend to get prospects or players out of the transfer portal to try and win ball games. It is what it is. We'll see what the House settlement ultimately does, because it's not a magic wand that's going to fix everything. But how can Penn State keep up in this NIL arms race? They are better positioned, but they're losing right now. Why are they losing these recruiting battles? They should be able to go up against USC and Ohio State to try to make a competitive offer for Luke Wafle, or maybe they do something differently to secure a commitment from Joey O'Brien, Khary Adams, Grayson McKeogh, because, offers were comparable. Rarely do I hear Penn State's offer was better. I hear Penn State's offer was respectable. It was comparable. It was something worth considering. They made a late push. Never do I hear that Penn State made the best offer, and it wasn't even close. You hear that for SEC schools and so on and so forth, right? But not in Penn State's case. There's a reason that NIL is not where it necessarily should be or where fans would like it to be, and that's because Penn State emptied the reserves. Roster retention is expensive in this NIL age. Transfer portal additions can be expensive. Let me try to lay it all out here. Because when you go and get Trevor Pena out of the transfer portal, the alleged $2 million, I don't think Penn State paid a full $2 million that Fran Brown, Syracuse coach, was trying to say that Trevor Pena was looking for. But it certainly wasn't $250,000 or $300,000 either, right? If you're getting what I'm saying, it was probably north of $1 million. Somewhere in that ballpark, between 1 to 2 million, we can estimate. I don't have any official reports on that. I don't think anybody does, but I think it's safe to say that Trevor Pena probably got over $1 million from Penn State. So what we're talking about with Luke Wafle specifically, he gets over $1 million. Trevor Pena gets over $1 million. What do we think Amari Campbell, linebacker from North Carolina, got in the transfer portal? They just joined Penn State for fun. I'm not saying they didn't want to be at Penn State. Amari Campbell does have 2 seasons. He's going to be a starting linebacker alongside Tony Rojas, hopefully for 2025 and 2026 together. And I say that, I preface that because of the NFL draft. If Tony Rojas has a really good season or Amari Campbell, maybe they want to entertain that. I'm just saying because we never know. But that costs NIL. And the reserve funds that Penn State could have had for this class of 2026, they don't have because of what they did in the transfer portal, because of what they did with roster retention. Drew Allar is allegedly making over $3 million according to the On3 NIL estimates. That's Allar. And then you get back Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, who would have been drafted if they had gone. Same thing. I mean, Allar would have been drafted potentially late in the first round. Singleton and Allen could have been drafted in either the second, third, or fourth round. Zach Wheatley, another prospect that could have gone into the draft. Zane Durant, Danai Dennis Sutton. That's going to cost you NIL money. So the money that was reserved for any sort of expenses, anything, so that's recruiting, that's transfer portal, roster retention, it primarily went to roster retention in the transfer portal. That's why I say national title or bust for Penn State, because they're going all in on this season. The move to go get Jim Knowles away from Ohio State, to retain a bulk of your roster of guys that are legitimate NFL draft prospects wherever they may land. They could have been drafted this cycle and they chose to come back. And then the uncharacteristic moves in the transfer portal to go and get a Trevor Pena or an Amari Campbell when, you know, a market NIL value says one thing, but Penn State's willing to, for the sake of just getting the best available player, to help them win a national title. That's why I say I hope it's all worth it. I hope it is all worth it because Penn State is somewhat sacrificing on the future to win a national title now. This is the window for this 2025-2026 national title. So they are where they could maybe use some extra NIL leverage. They end up losing out because they don't have that NIL leverage because it went to other expenses. And that is okay in the scheme of things, but hindsight's going to be 2020. It's either the most intelligent move, they knew what they were doing, or you messed up. So we're only going to know in due time. But that's why I'm not concerned, because this roster management that Penn State is currently doing, I would rather it go to having Drew Allar for year 4, Singleton and Allen for year 4, denied Dennis Sutton, Zach Wheatley. Do you want me to do the list again? I can do the list again, but you get my point. And 2027 already has 3 prospects in the top 50. So when Allar is done, Singleton and Allen, denied Dennis Sutton, all these veteran players that Penn State has paid with extra NIL can now go back to and be devoted to other things like high school recruiting. That's why they have a top 10 player in the nation, a top 30 player, a number 1 overall running back in Keemon Spell, a top 3 wide receiver, top 30 player in Khalil Taylor, and a top 50 player in Leighton Von Brandt as an offensive tackle. So Penn State, yeah, they took a gut punch in recruiting, but there's a reason for it. So we talked about the what, we talked about the how, and now the why here of where everything stands. I'm not concerned about it. Penn State has good NIL. It's not the best, but it is good. And Penn State's going to respond. They're not going to take this one by the wayside. They are going to respond to this. And it's all for a national title at the end of the day. And thank you so much to each and every one of you for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I really appreciate the support on this channel. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. If you're not one, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you check out the portal with host Brian Smith, recruiting show, transfer portal show here in the Locked On Podcast Network. Like Locked On Nittany Lions is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And for the latest daily conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.